I spent 26 years correcting other people's birth records, and then I woke up inside a novel as the girl it was about to throw out. The comments were already telling her to pack. My niece sent me the link on a wet Thursday in October. Dilly's is 19 and thinks I need hobbies, and the message said only, "You will hate this. It is about fairground people and inheritance, and there is a girl in it who has your job." That last part was a lie. There is no registrar in the fairground Heiress. There is a records clerk in Chapter 9 who exists for one paragraph to be unhelpful at a counter, which is what we are for in books. I read 4 chapters that night with the lamp on and my reading glasses sliding down, and I remember thinking that whoever wrote it had never once been inside a register office, because the plot turned on a birth certificate being destroyed, and birth certificates are not destroyed. Then I put the phone face down on the carpet, and I turned over, and I woke up 24 years old with somebody else's hair in my mouth. The caravan was warm and smelled of paraffin and clean laundry. There was a photograph screwed to the wall above the bunk, a family of 4 in front of a set of gallopers, and one of the 4 was the face I had just seen in the little mirror by the door, Corisande Wray, 24. Daughter, on paper, of Bettina and the late Halloran Wray, of Wray's Grand Steam Fair. 400 years of showman on one side, and a fitted kitchen the size of my hallway on the other. And drifting across the middle of my vision, in a soft gray type that did not belong to anything in that room, somebody called Nutmeg 88 had written, "Here we go, 4 chapters in, and the fake is finally getting what she deserves." I want to be honest about the first hour. I did not think I have transmigrated into a web novel. I thought I have had a stroke. I sat on the step of that caravan in the cold with my hands flat on the metal and waited to lose the use of my left side, and when I did not, I started reading the gray type instead, because it kept coming, and because after 26 years of reading other people's handwriting upside down across a counter, I am very good at reading things that are not meant for me. I had been a registrar for 26 years. 26 years in the same district office on Cadger Lane, with the radiator that only worked in June, registering births and deaths and marrying people on Saturdays. And if you do that for long enough, you stop believing in documents as objects and start seeing them as a kind of weather system. Everything leaves a trace, everything is dated, everything has a person's initials on it somewhere, and that person had a Tuesday. I registered 11,000 births. I know that because a woman from the county came round in my 20th year with a certificate for me, and it had the number on it, and I put it in a drawer because it seemed a strange thing to be proud of and a stranger thing to throw away. I have registered the birth of a baby whose father was in the car park and would not come in. I have registered twins where the mother could not decide which was which, and we waited 40 minutes with the pen on the desk and nobody hurried her, and I have registered a death and a birth in the same hour for the same family and made the tea myself in between. In 2007, the roof over the Cadger Lane strong room failed on a Sunday in August, and I was there at 6 in the morning in Wellington's with a colleague called Mr. Petrus, lifting bound volumes off the bottom shelf and standing them open on trestles in the car park with the sun on them. We lost nothing, not one page. I have thought about that morning more times than is reasonable, because what I understood standing in that car park at 7 o'clock was that the whole apparatus, the strong room and the acid-free paper and the rule about the margin and the 2 declarants and the initials and the date, exists for exactly one purpose, which is that in some year I will not live to see somebody is going to be lied to about who they are, and the book is going to be the only thing in the room that is not on anybody's side. And once, in my 15th year, a woman of about my age now came in and asked, very politely, whether we still had the entry for a baby registered in 1968 that she had been told was destroyed at the time to spare everybody embarrassment. We had it. Of course we had it. She read it standing up because she would not sit down, and then she thanked me and went out to her car and stayed in it for an hour and 10 minutes, and I watched her from the window between appointments and did not go out because there is nothing to say, and going out would have been for me. And I have corrected. That is the part that matters. In my third year, a man of 63 came in about his father's entry, 41 years after the fact, because the surname had been written down as it sounded rather than as it was spelled, and the whole family had been living under a version of themselves invented by a tired clerk in 1961. He had a shoebox, he had a baptism record, and a school register, and 2 letters. It took us 9 weeks and a statutory declaration from 2 people who were there, and at the end of it I put the correction in the margin of the original entry in my own handwriting, and I initialed it, and I dated it, and the wrong name stayed exactly where it was, still legible, forever. He asked me why we did not simply cross it out. I told him what I have told several hundred people since, and what I would end up telling 400 showmen in a transport shed. We do not cross things out. We write in the margin. The margin is the whole point. The comments were the worst part of it. Not the situation, not the caravan, not waking up inside a stranger's 24-year-old knees, which, by the way, hurt less than my own, and I resented that. The comments. They floated at the left of my vision in soft gray, 4 or 5 at a time, and they scrolled when new ones arrived, and nobody else could see them. Corisande's mother walked through them. I watched Bettina Ray's face pass straight through the sentence, "Honestly, the fake daughter arc is my favorite trope," and land on the kettle. They were not cruel exactly. That would have been easier. They were comfortable. There were 400 people out there somewhere reading this as an evening's entertainment, and they had decided, in the way a crowd decides, that the girl in this caravan was an imposter who had eaten another girl's life, and that watching her lose it would be satisfying. Somebody called Ferris Wheel had written, "She has had 24 years of the good life on someone else's ticket. Let her feel it for once." Somebody had replied, "Exactly," and 11 people had agreed. And here is the thing that I could not make any of them understand for another 11 days. Nobody in that comment section, and nobody in that family, and nobody in that novel had asked a single question about the hospital. They knew there had been a swap. They knew the year. They had a woman with a test result on her way north. What they did not have, and what not one of 400 readers had thought to want, was the name of the ward, the time of the birth, the number of babies on the unit that night, or the name of the registrar who took the entries. All of that is written down, all of it. It is written down in a book that is still in a strong room, and it has been sitting there for 24 years being extremely boring, which is the safest thing a fact can be. So I stopped waiting to have a stroke and got up and started asking. Sable Voyce arrived on a Tuesday in April. The novel had told me she would in a chapter I had read on my own sofa in October, and knowing it in advance did not make it smaller. She came up the yard in a hire car with a solicitor beside her and a document wallet on her knees, and the whole winter yard stopped working to watch, 40 vehicles and 3 families and a boy of 9 holding a socket wrench he had forgotten he was holding. She was 30. She had Bettina's chin, which everybody said within about 4 minutes, and she had the tired, careful manner of somebody who has been told a very large thing and has decided to be dignified about it. I did not hate her. The comments wanted me to, and I could feel them wanting it. And I want to be clear that I never once hated Sable Voyce, because I could see from the yard what she could not see, which was that she was being carried. Bettina cried. Jonah, who is 27 and runs the transport and believes he runs everything else, put his arm round Sable in front of the whole yard within 90 seconds of meeting her, which I thought was fast even for him. And Penn Arkwright, the family's solicitor, a small dry woman in a good coat, opened the document wallet on the bonnet of the hire car and read out a percentage. 99.997. That was the number. a private laboratory in Chester, a cheek swab from Sable, and a cheek swab from Bettina, taken 11 weeks earlier. And Bettina turned to me in front of everybody and said, "I always knew." She said it with her hand on Sable's arm and her face wet and her voice absolutely sincere, and that is the sentence I would like on the record, because she meant it, and because it was not true, and because those two things can live in the same woman quite happily for 24 years. The novel's chapter 4 ends there. I know because I read it. Corisande packs a bag, refuses money, walks down the yard in the rain with the comments cheering, and goes to work in a bakery for 6 chapters to prove she has dignity. I did not do that. I asked Penn Arkwright a question instead. I asked her whether the laboratory had tested Sable against Bettina or against Halloran. There was a pause of about 2 seconds in that yard, and in that 2 seconds I learned everything I needed to know about how much thinking anybody had done. Halloran Wray died in 2019. There was nothing to test him against. Penn Arkwright, who is a good solicitor and was not enjoying her afternoon, said that a maternal match was sufficient for the family's purposes. And I said, "Sufficient for what purpose exactly?" Because a maternal match tells you that this woman is Bettina's daughter, and nobody in this yard has suggested that Bettina gave birth to somebody else's baby. The question on the table is which baby left that hospital in which family's arms. And a match to the mother does not answer it. It only tells you that at least one of the 2 babies went home with the right woman. I said it quite gently. I was not trying to win the yard. I was trying to find out whether anybody had thought, and the answer, which I could see in Jonah's face, was that nobody had. Here is what I did over the next 11 days, and here is the part that the 400 readers found so boring that the comments thinned out to almost nothing, and I have never been so glad of anything in my life. I found out where Corisande was born. Aldbeck Cottage Hospital, 12 miles from the Winter Yard, closed in 2011, and now a dental practice, and Acosta. I found out the date, the 3rd of April 2001, which was on the back of the photograph screwed to the caravan wall. And then I went to the district office in Aldbeck, which is a different district from mine, and a different country from mine, and did not know me from a hole in the road. And I did what any member of the public may do, which is fill in a form and pay £12.50. Anybody can do this. This is the thing that people do not know and that I have spent a career telling them. You do not have to be related to a person to buy a certified copy of their birth entry in England. You do not have to prove an interest. If you can supply enough detail to identify the entry, the office will find it and send it, and the copy that arrives is a copy of everything on that entry, including anything written in the margin. I ordered Corisande Wrays. Then I ordered Sable Voices, which took longer because Voice was an adoptive name and I had to work backwards through the index. And then, because 26 years teaches you to look at the pages either side of the one you want, I ordered every birth registered in the Aldbeck subdistrict in the 8 days from the 1st of April 2001. There were 9. 2 of them were on the 3rd. And a correction to a birth entry is never an erasure. I have said this to widows and to angry men and to a woman who wanted her father's name taken off a certificate so badly that she wept on my counter for 20 minutes, and I said it to her too. The original entry stays. It stays legible. The correction goes in the margin, and beside it goes the authority for the correction and the initials of the officer who made it, and the date. That is not a courtesy. That is the law, and it is the law precisely because families lie and clerks are tired, and somebody in 2025 will need to know what the page said before anybody improved it. Both of the 3rd of April entries had been corrected. Both, not one. Both in the same hand, on the same day, the 11th of June 2001, 10 weeks after the births. The hand was small and backward sloping with a looped D, and the initials beside it were A.K. and the authority quoted was a statutory declaration made by 2 informants under Section 29. I sat in the costa that used to be the maternity corridor with 2 pieces of paper on a sticky table, and I felt the whole thing turn over. Because a correction requires declarants, 2 people who were present or who have direct knowledge swearing in front of a commissioner. Their names are on the declaration, and the declaration is kept, and the officer who accepted it and wrote the margin is on the roll with a name and a career and a pension and an address. A .K. was Aubrey Kell, Superintendent Registrar for the Oldbeck District from 1994 to 2008, retired at 61. And Aubrey Kell has been on the Wray family's books as an advisor since 2009 at £4,000 a year, paid quarterly, for services described in the accounts as archival and genealogical consultancy, which I found because Wray's Grand Steam Fair is a limited company and files accounts, and because a man of 9 and a boy called Ferris Wheel had both failed to notice that companies do that. He was at the yard twice a week. He had been at Halloran's funeral. He had, and I want you to sit with this, given Corisande a fountain pen for her 18th birthday. The comments came back for that bit. Somebody wrote, okay, wait. Somebody wrote, why does the fake daughter know about Section 29? Somebody wrote, is this still the same book? The second scheme was faster than the first, and it came from Jonah, and it came within a day of me ordering the 3rd certificate, which told me something about who was watching my post. He came into the caravan without knocking and put his hands flat on the table and told me that I was harassing a grieving family, that the yard had made a decision, that Sable had been through enough, and that if I ordered one more document he would have me taken off the ground and my caravan towed to the roadside with everything I owned in it. I let him finish. Then I asked him who had told him I had ordered documents. He said nobody. He said it too quickly. And then he said that Aubrey had mentioned it, that Aubrey keeps an eye on the family's records as a kindness, that a request had come through the Oldbeck office, and Aubrey still knows people there, and it is a small world. I said, so a retired superintendent registrar, who is paid by this family, is being told by his old office who has been buying certificates, and Jonah Wray, 27 years old, who had been up since 5, doing a genuinely hard job that I respect, stood in that little kitchen and could not think of one single thing to say. Then Penn Arkwright arrived with an agreement, which is what solicitors do when the shouting has failed. A family settlement, £60,000, a vehicle, and a signature saying I made no further inquiries into the circumstances of my birth and made no statements to any third party, ever. She put it on the table with a pen, and I want to be fair to Penn Arkwright, who I think was told about 4% of what was going on, because she said one thing that was almost kind. She said, you are being offered a soft landing, and in my experience the people who refuse them do not get a second offer. I said I did not want the money. She asked me what I wanted. I said I wanted to know how many babies were on that unit that night, because it was still bothering me that 2 entries had been corrected on the same morning by the same man, and 2 corrections is a strange number. 1 correction is a mistake, 2 is a swap, but a swap only needs 1 entry altered if the babies simply went to the wrong beds, because the entries follow the mothers, not the cots. 2 corrections meant somebody had gone in afterwards and put the paperwork into a shape that matched a story. And if you are going to put the paperwork into a shape, you do it for the babies you are looking at. You do not do it for the one you are not. There were 3 babies in Oldbeck that night. I got that from the delivery ledger, which the hospital's records went to the county archive when it closed, and the county archive has a reading room, and the reading room has a request form, and I have been filling in request forms since 1999. 3 deliveries between the 2nd of April at 9 in the evening and the 4th of April at 6 in the morning. Wray, Voice, though she was not Voice then, and Lunt. Lunt did not appear in the novel. Lunt did not appear in the comments. Lunt was not at the yard, was not in the plot, was not in anybody's plan and had never been looked for by a single human being in 24 years, because in the story everyone had agreed to tell there were only ever 2 girls, and a story with 2 girls in it does not have room for a third. Only 2 of the 3 entries had been corrected in June 2001. Lunt had not been touched, which is what you would do if you are Aubrey Kell and somebody has come to you in the spring of 2001 with a problem, and the problem is that the wrong baby has gone home to a family with money. You fix the 2 entries that account for the 2 babies you know about, and you make them consistent with each other, and you go home. You do not go through the rest of the week. Why would you? Nobody is going to look, because the only person who could look is a registrar, and you are the registrar. Rin Lunt worked in a laundrette on Skidrow High Street, between a vape shop and a place that cashed checks, 24 years old. Care from the age of 6, which I learned from her and not from a file, because there are things you do not go and read behind a person's back even when you can. She had a lanyard with her name on it, and a way of standing that I recognized, because I have watched people stand like that on the other side of my counter for a quarter of a century. It is how you stand when you have learned that officialdom is something that happens to you. I did not tell her that afternoon. I have thought about that a great deal since, and I still think I was right. I bought a service wash I did not need, and I asked her where she was born, and she said Oldbeck, and I said so was I, and she said everyone round here was, they shut it. Then I went out to the car and sat with my hands on the wheel for a while, because I could see the shape of what I was holding. If I took it to the yard, the Wrays would find their daughter, and a girl who had been folding other people's sheets since she was 18 would be handed 400 years of showland and a mother who cried easily, and I did not know whether that was a gift. I have registered enough families to know that being wanted late is not the same as being wanted. So I did the only thing I could think of that was honest. I went back in on the Friday, and I told Ren Lunt the truth, all of it, sitting on a plastic chair by the dryers with a 50-pence piece going round in my fingers, and I told her that she did not have to do anything at all, that the entry was hers, whatever she did, that it would still be there in 10 years if she wanted it then, and that if she never wanted it, I would go away and she would never see me again. She was quiet for a long time. Then she asked whether the man who wrote in the margin knew. I said yes. I said he had known since the 11th of June 2001, and that he had been paid £4,000 a year for 16 years by the family who took the wrong baby home. And Ren Lunt, 24 years old, in a tabard, said, "Then I want to be there when somebody says it to him." The writing season ball is held in the transport shed, the 2nd Saturday of March, and it is the one night of the year when everybody comes off the road and into the same building. 400 people. Trestles down the middle, the big generator running the lights. Children asleep under coats along the back wall by 9, and at the far end, the Wray family at the top table, because they have sat there since before the war. Bettina had the microphone. She had been going to announce Sable formally, and the reordering of the family holdings, and there had been a photographer from the Showman's paper. I want to be precise about what I did, because people who have heard this story secondhand have made it more dramatic than it was, and the whole point is that it was not dramatic. I did not bring a folder. I did not bring the certificates. I had them, obviously. They were in a drawer in the caravan, and they had been there for a fortnight. I left them there deliberately, because I had spent 26 years watching people wave paper at each other across my counter, and I knew exactly what happens when you do. The other side says the paper is fake, or out of date, or obtained improperly, and then everybody argues about the paper, and nobody ever finds out what is true. So when Bettina put the microphone down, I said, before anybody signs anything, I would like to ask Mr. Kell one question in front of everyone, and then I will sit down.
Aubrey Kell was at the third table with a glass of stout. 78, a small, neat man with a cardigan under his jacket. The kind of man who is described as a gentleman by people who have never had to deal with him professionally. I asked him whose handwriting was in the margin of the Wray entry.
He said he could not possibly remember, after all these years, without seeing it. I said that was fair, and that he did not have to remember, because it could be checked in about 4 minutes by anyone in the room. And then I turned to Bettina Wray and I gave her the district, the sub-district, the volume, the page, and the entry number. And I told her that the Aldbeck office does certified copies online, that it costs £12.50, that the digital copy comes to your email, and that she should order it herself on her own phone, right now, so that nobody could ever tell her afterwards that I had tampered with it. She did not want to. Jonah did not want her to. Penn Arkwright, to her enormous credit, leaned over and said, "Order it, Bettina." 400 people watched a woman in a green dress type her card details into a telephone with the generator humming. It took 19 minutes. I have never in my life been so aware of a room. Somebody's child woke up and was carried out. Somebody laughed at the back and was shushed. The comments went absolutely berserk in the corner of my vision, hundreds of them, faster than I could read, and I want to record that the last one I managed to catch before I stopped looking said, "She did not even bring the paper." Jonah tried twice in that 19 minutes. The first time he said the whole thing was a setup, that I had got at somebody in the Aldbeck office the way Aubrey got at people, and I said that was a serious allegation and an easy one to test, because the copy would arrive from the General Register Office's own system to his mother's own email on his mother's own card, and if he thought I had reached inside a government database, he was welcome to say so into the microphone with the paper's photographer standing there. The second time he said that even if the margin said something, a note from 2001 proved nothing about who anybody's daughter was, and that one was better, and I told him so. I said he was right, that a margin does not prove parentage. What it proves is that on the 11th of June 2001, a man went into a bound book and changed 2 entries about 2 babies on the strength of a declaration sworn by 2 people, and that if the change was innocent, then the declaration is still in a file in Southport with their names on it, and we can all read it on Monday. Nobody in that shed wanted to wait until Monday. Then Bettina Wray's phone made a noise, and she opened it, and she read the margin of her own daughter's birth entry in the handwriting of the man sitting at the third table with a glass of stout. She said his name out loud, not to accuse him. She said it the way you say a name when you have been holding a shape in your head for 24 years and it has just changed shape. And then she sat down on the bench with the phone in both hands and cried in a way that I would not want to hear again. Jonah went for him. 2 of the Lees family got there first and stood in front of Kel, not to protect him, to stop Jonah, because there were children in that shed, and because showmen sort things out in a room with the doors shut. And Aubrey Kell, who had not moved at all, said the only thing he said all night. He said, "I was asked to make it right." "By whom?" I said, and he looked at Bettina, and he did not answer, and that was the answer. She had known in 2001, not everything. She had known that a mistake had been made, and that the baby she had brought home was thriving, and that the other family had money troubles, and she had gone to a man she had been at school with, who happened to be a superintendent registrar, and she had asked him to make it right. And he had made 2 marginal notes in a bound book and taken £4,000 a year from 2009 for keeping an eye on things. Neither of them had ever wondered about a third cot. I told the room, the rest standing up, and it took 4 minutes, and I did not raise my voice because you do not need to in a transport shed with the generator on if you wait for the quiet. 3 deliveries, 2 corrections. 1 entry never touched, in a district office 12 miles away, belonging to a woman of 24 who had been in care since she was 6 and had never been looked for. And then Wren Lunt, who had been standing at the back by the doors since 8:30 with her coat still on, walked up the middle of that shed past 400 people, and put her own certified copy on the trestle table in front of Bettina Wray. She had ordered it herself the previous Tuesday for £12.50, without telling me. The inquiry sat for 4 days in November, not a court at that stage. The General Register Office conducted it because a correction made under Section 29 on a false statutory declaration is not a small administrative matter, it is a criminal one, and because the officer who made it had been in post for 14 years, and every correction he ever signed now had a question mark over it. They looked at 406 of them. 11 others were wrong, 6 were clerical, and 5 were not, and 4 families found out things in the spring that they had not asked to know, which is a cost of this story that I am not going to pretend away. Aubrey Kell was prosecuted for making a false statutory declaration and for misconduct in public office, and he was convicted of the first and pleaded to the second, and he got 16 months suspended because he was 79 by then and because of his heart. He was struck from the role, which mattered more to him. The $4,000 a year came out in the accounts, and the showman's paper ran it on the front page under a headline I will not repeat. The laboratory in Chester was not at fault, and said so at length in a letter that nobody had asked for, and they were right, because they had been sent 2 swabs and a question, and had answered the question they were sent. That is worth saying plainly, because the comments had spent 4 chapters treating a percentage as though it were an oracle. 99.997 was true. It was simply the answer to a question that did not decide anything, asked by people who did not want to ask a better one. The Showman's Guild held its own hearing in the January, which has no legal force, and which mattered more to that yard than the criminal court did, and the outcome was that Aubrey Kell's honorary membership of 40 years was rescinded, and that the Wray family kept its ground rights, which was the correct decision and took 11 hours. The county archive changed its practice, too, in a small way that will outlive all of this. Delivery ledgers for closed maternity units are now indexed by night rather than by mother, so that the question I had to spend 4 days constructing, how many babies were in this building at this hour, can be asked at a counter in 10 minutes by anybody. Bettina Wray was not prosecuted. The declarants in 2001 were her sister and a nurse, both of whom said in November that Bettina had asked them to sign a form to fix a clerical error, and I believe them, and so did the inquiry. She resigned every position she held in the company. Jonah runs it now, badly at first and then not badly, and he has not spoken to me since the ball, and I do not expect him to. Sable Voyce went home to Chester. She is Bettina's daughter, which was true on the day she arrived and is true now, and it turns out she had gone home from Oldbeck with a family called Voice who wanted her very much, and she has said publicly that she does not intend to take a name or a share, and I hope that holds, and I am not certain that it will. And Corisande Wray, whose knees I was walking around in, was not a Wray, and was not a Lunt, and was not a Voice. The third entry, the one nobody corrected, was Wren's. Corisande's entry, once you took Kell's margin off it, said what it had always said underneath, which was that she was born to a woman of 22 called Ivy Sari, who left the hospital on the 5th of April 2001 and did not come back, and whose own entry I found in about 10 minutes, because that is what 26 years is for. I told her, that is a strange sentence to write, because I was her, and because I do not know to this day what I was. I told her in the mirror by the caravan door at 2 a.m, with the ball still going in the shed, out loud, the whole thing, the way I would have told anyone across my counter, slowly and without softening it, and without letting go of the fact that the entry is hers, whatever she does with it. I woke up in my own bed on Cadger Lane on a Tuesday in October with my phone face down on the carpet and Chapter 5 unread. I have never found the book again. Dilly says she sent me a link to a recipe. But there is a woman called Wren Lunt who writes to me twice a year, and she is not in Showland and never went. She does an access course and works Saturdays at the same laundrette because she likes it there, and Bettina has bought her nothing because she was told very clearly not to try. Wren sends the letters to the office rather than the house, addressed to the registrar, which I think is a joke, and I think it is also not. And in a strong room in Oldbeck there is a bound book with 2 marginal notes in a small backward-sloping hand, and beside them now there are 2 more, in a different hand, dated last February, correcting the correction. Both of the wrong versions are still there, still legible. That is not a failure of the system, and it is not untidiness. You do not cross things out, you write in the margin. Somebody in 50 years is going to need to know what the page said before anybody improved it, and when they come to the counter and ask, there will be a person there who can show them.